Hi, I'm Dr. Alphonse Javed. Over the past year, we have had so many amazing guests on the show. We have talked about everything from chess ministry to immigration, urban missions to cricket, and gentrification to dance. We have heard so many stories of how God is working in urban settings, in Muslim contexts, and around the world. Every week, we share a new episode highlighting an important voice we believe deserves to be heard. But this month, we will be resharing our most popular episodes. Even if you have already heard them, we believe you can still learn something new. Please enjoy.
If we really think about it, to be very selfish because I have not planned, so my failure to plan is going to most likely negatively affect my loved ones.
You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome back to our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed. I am joined by Reverend Natisha Matthews, an ordained elder and estate attorney. Today we will be talking about the importance of estate planning for Christians, particularly in urban communities. This might sound like a strange topic for our podcast, but we will learn today why this is so important. Reverend Natisha, her area of law practice are trusts, estates, and real estates. She is passionate about teaching believers and the urban community about estate planning. Currently, she is one of the ordained elders of Bethel Gospel Assembly in New York City. Thank you for joining us today, Reverend Natisha. How are you and how you been this past year and even before that?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Javed, for having me on this platform. It is truly an honor and a privilege. As you mentioned, this is a topic that is not generally discussed on this platform. So again, it's an opportunity for a wonderful opportunity, I should say, to just be on here, I guess to be the first, right, of estate planning attorneys to have this important dialogue about a very important topic. As you mentioned, it is passionate. I'm very passionate about it. This year thus far, I have been truly blessed. The ministry has been growing, estate planning has been growing, and it definitely God's hand is upon this area in my life. So again, I'm grateful, as we'll talk later on about how I came to become an estate planning attorney. Definitely was all the Lord's doing because it was never part of my in my vision. So I'm again grateful to be here. Thank you again for having me.
That's so awesome. Thank you. So before we get started, please tell us very briefly about your family. I believe family is so important because it helps to humanize us as persons. And every person I bring on this show, I ask them to do that so our audience can connect with them on human level. So please share a little about your family first.
Sure, definitely. Well, I am a first generation American. My parents are from Jamaica. So I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. My education was highly important, emphasized, was raised in a single parent household. So wasn't Christian at all. Education was probably more of the God, if you will, more highly emphasized. It's always being in an urban community. So I can definitely relate on that level. Anytime the community generally tends to be Caribbean, small, and urban. So that's pretty much of my background and my growing up and my pedigree.
That's awesome. To start off, could you tell us a little more about your journey to becoming an estate attorney and elder?
Definitely. So at a young age, I always wanted to be an attorney. I did the traditional things that would get me along that path, went to high school, went to college, got good grades. So I definitely knew I was going to go straight through to become this attorney, eventually become this corporate attorney. However, wasn't saved at the time. And so God had apparently a different plan for my life. And so I didn't go immediately from college into law school. There was a period, there was like a few years actually before I even pursued a law. But God had a plan for me. And during that time, I had an encounter with God and I gave my heart to the Lord. And so from there, I've just been passionate and committed to serving the Lord, from being a part of prayer bands, teaching ministries. That was pretty much my walk. I was a paralegal here and there, but I was just so passionate about pursuing God and the things of God and ministry. And even went so far as I earned my Master of Divinity at Alliance Theological Seminary, which was part of NIAC, and continued to pursue ministry at Bethel Gospel Assembly, where I was a Bible teacher. I was leading over the intercessors, became part of the leader for evangelism ministry as well. But there was something I felt God was still tugging my heart to continue to pursue law. But I was like, but God, I'm sold out. I definitely want to go into full-time ministry. But there was that tug. And so, okay, well, let me, apply, and I got accepted to law school. I passed the bar, the New York State bar. I got admitted to practice in New York State. And my first job as an attorney was in a law firm where the senior partner trained me in trust and estates. But I always thought I was going to be, like I said, a corporate attorney. At this time, I just knew I was going to be an employment law attorney. But he's like, no, you need to learn this. And he was very diligent, and you really need to learn it. But I said, God had his hand upon me, right? And because God is strategic and God understands divine timing, he knew that I needed to practice this area of law again for such a time as this. And when I was like, this area of law makes no sense. Why would you want me to practice that? But again, God knew that. And today I have, believe it or not, this area of law has opened so many doors for me. I've been able to teach my colleagues how to execute a will remotely during the time of COVID. It has opened so many doors for me to teach colleagues and do workshops for churches, for non-for-profits. Again, just following, being obedient to the Lord, and just really understanding the area of law. And so that's how I became a trust and estates attorney. And so I believe after like my first year and a half of law school, my Bishop Brown, said, Natisha, now it's time to elevate you as an elder. And so I went from minister MIT Natisha, right, to now I'm elder Natisha. And it's like, I have an assignment. I hear the Lord saying that now it's time for you to be the director over prayer initiatives for the church. And so that's how I became the elder. That's my journey thus far. And I'm still there teaching, still an elder. So that's pretty much my journey on how I became an estates attorney and an elder at Bethel Gospel Assembly.
That's beautiful. And I'm so glad that God walked you through this journey and you see the hand of the Lord over your life in that area of your life, because usually people tend to think about their professional life separate from their spiritual life. And I like that you have this clear connection between the two. If anything, you see the hand of God first, leading you to something and also using that for the kingdom work. That's just beautiful. So why is estate planning so important? It is not a common topic for churches to address. And just to clarify for any listeners, could you go over what estate planning is?
Sure. Well, I'll start with that. I'll answer that question. So estate planning is a tool used to manage, preserve, or as well as distribute your assets, right? In the event that you become incapacitated or in the event of death. Now, I mean, it's a lot of words, and you'd be like, manage what? But let's think about it. I always put it in the context of COVID. During the time of COVID, it threw most, if not all of us, right, into a state of hysteria. We did not know what to do. Many people were in the hospital. Many people were head of households. People didn't have access to bank accounts. They didn't have access to a lot of things. So if I, as an individual, am the sole person that can access my bank account, if for some reason I become incapacitated and I don't have anything in place, my bank account becomes frozen. And so a head of a household who now was everything, right, of this household, that your spouse doesn't automatically give access to your bank account. So now that becomes frozen. And so things like that, I could have put something in place, like a power of attorney, right, in place that would give someone access in the event I become incapacitated, or in case, like say, a will, where my assets go upon my passing. And so I want to kind of talk about, so things that is you can, documentation in estate planning, basics consist of a will, power of attorney, healthcare proxy. Let's start with the basics there, right? So in a will, I can say where I want my assets to go. Upon my passing, who should have X, Y, or Z. Power of attorney, very important, going back to COVID. So a power of attorney, I give my agent the authority to speak on my behalf when especially I am unable to do so. If I already have if I'm incapacitated, I can't give that authority, right? So if so that means everything is frozen. No one can act on my behalf. And so that's challenging for me, because now if someone cannot act on my behalf, someone has to act on my behalf. Bills have to be paid. Things have to get done. So now I have to petition the court, which is not an automatic process, which takes thousands of dollars to get done, when I could have put something in place earlier on, right? And the same thing with the healthcare proxy. Now, let's say if your spouse is around, your spouse is alive. Yes, we have the Family Cares Act, where I may not need that document in place. But now, say, for example, I don't have those individuals. All my loved ones have passed away. I still need someone, if I'm, God forbid, something happens to me, to speak on my behalf. Again, I have not planned. So anything, we're speaking about planning for assets upon my passing, or planning for myself in the event that I, as an individual, become incapacitated. That's what I wanted. That's really estate planning broadly. I think for our audience, I think that it's fair. What I find that is that a lot of people feel, especially the urban community, that I don't have any assets, so I don't need to plan. So I tell people, if you have a pen or a pencil, you need to plan, because guarantee when you're passing, your loved ones are going to fight over that pen or pencil. I see it all the time. So when we plan to fail for our estates, right, it's almost guaranteed, right? I'm tend to create some type of chaos. I'm going to create uncertainty, and I'm going to create confusion for my loved ones, right? So if I put my failure to plan today is going to affect my loved ones tomorrow. So it's so important for us to plan today, even if you feel like you have nothing, right? Especially the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy, at least have that in place, so that you are preparing for those, right? Again, your loved ones, right? We want to be prepared for so many things. We prepare for a baby coming. We have baby showers. We have wedding. We have bridal showers. We have pastoral anniversaries. But when it comes down to estate planning, we almost drop the ball, if you will. And I know we're going to talk about it because I'm so passionate about it. I strongly believe that, especially in the urban community, it's not something that we know about. And so if I don't know about it, I'm not going to plan for it.
Yeah. So how would an urban setting affect estate planning? Are there different things to consider in an urban setting versus a more suburban community?
I don't think there's so much what to expect, but I think it's the mindset of the people in the community. Again, so if you in an urban community, people generally tend to, estate planning is not commonplace, right? It tends to be the members of an urban community tend to think of more of survival. Survival is more of a commonplace. Tell me how I can, survive in this community. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, right? I don't have an estate. I don't have any assets. Teach me how to survive in this community. Versus in an urban setting, I generally find that my urban clients, right, they are planning for children who are not even born yet. Right? Because it's commonplace. They understand I need to prepare for a legacy. Urban community don't understand, but estate planning is not legacy for us. It's not commonplace.
Excuse me. So is it a mindset then that on one side, or cultural norm I'm just trying to understand. So I totally see your point. In the urban setting, they are just in the survival mode. So the culture is different, therefore. But in the suburban setting, it seems to me at least that they are going through a generational cultural norm where the previous one did it, so I'm going to do it, and my son is going to do it. So there's like a part of their education system or family system that this is how we do things. Is it cultural norm somehow?
Both, both. I think it's both. It's cultural. It's a racial norm.
Okay.
It's both. So if my great grandmother, for example, she left me a trust or she left me a will, that's being discussed in my household. So
Mm.
again, it's commonplace for me versus if that's not being discussed in an urban setting, in an urban household, I would never know it unless I become educated, or for me in my urban household, that wasn't discussed at all. So it's not until I became a trust and estates attorney that now it's like, oh wow, I have to get things in place. And when I often go to various not-for-profits, or even when I go to workshops to learn more about the latest laws that come into place, you'll see it in the room filled with attorneys who don't look like me.
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
it's not commonplace for the urban community, or like the suburban people understand that better than my urban colleagues. Does that make sense? Or my urban community. When I teach, on it, it's like something like, oh wow, it's like something rare. Right. Because again, it's both. You have both the racial and the cultural norm that does not fit into.
Yeah. And I totally see your point, especially because when I talk about urban setting, I'm not just talking about New York City, Philadelphia, or other main cities in the United States. I'm talking about urban settings around the world. And when you think about Delhi or Bombay or Lahore or Karachi, it's very different. You're right, because when you are in a survival mode, you don't think about, oh, what I have. Usually, like, I don't have anything to think about. What I'm going to do. There's nothing in this house. So you don't think that these pots and pans or beds or chairs are worth anything. So you don't even think. But I totally see that both things are generation after generation. But those who are, which is the majority people in cities, most of the people are like that in urban settings. Is the number of those who have everything and they already have those state plannings and those kind of things, they are a small number. That's a minority. So it's also goes. I can understand why there will be lack of education or desire to even think
Mhm.
about it, because initially, if my thought is like I don't even have anything to give to my children or grandchildren, so why should I do that? And if there is a house, it's already known. Oh, my older son is going to take the first floor. My younger son is going to take the ground floor, and this is the area where your grandma is going to be, or whatever. However you want to, think about. So it's a more of a verbal trust type thing, especially in my culture, Pakistani culture. That's how things have been done for generations. So people continue. But let me take you back to our conversation and ask you this question: how should Christians, in particular, approach estate planning?
Mm. Hosea 4:6 says that my people are destroyed for
Mm,
lack of knowledge. And I think it behooves us as believers
mm,
to, number one, get the understanding and the knowledge about estate planning. There's so many
mm.
misconceptions, like I don't need it, right? But when we sit down and really understand what it entails, then you could be like, oh, wow, okay, so I definitely see I need this document. I need this document. Have to have these documents in place. So I think first and foremost is the education of what is estate planning, what is needed, and to hear testimonies of people who had it in place and their loved ones who had to deal with the effects of that, as well as people who had it in place and it was like very helpful for them moving forward as they got older.
It's interesting because you just reminding me so many cultural things that we have. My wife, she's a Caucasian believer because she comes from a different background, born and raised here, generation after generation. So when we got married, the first thing she did, she put a will. She wrote a will and put it in this box. And she told me, "You should write." I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to talk about, we don't talk about death. It's going to come and it's like, that's so immature. You need to plan. I said, why you want me to die? We just got married and you're talking about death. Why? So we got in this fight, argument, not once. So it's finally she dropped this whole conversation. But every time I open that box, I see that sitting there for her. And now we've been married for over a decade. And I was like, man, I've still not written anything. So I was like, hey, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's going to go to you. You are on everything, even our car is on both of our names. So I was like, I don't need to write. I don't want to think about my death. So I think it's the element of that tradition or culture is we don't want to think about death either. It's the survival mode, right? So you are
Right.
not surviving economically, like, okay, I gotta work hard, I gotta feed my children, get them to good school and all those things. But it's also survival is I'm gonna live. I'm gonna live. It's
Right.
like an indication of, I don't know, it's deep in my mind. And we function on two different channels when it comes to things like this. She plans, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna trust the Lord. I'm gonna trust the Lord. That's why I'm asking this Christian aspect of that.
Right.
So most people think of estate planning when they believe they are getting toward the end of their life, right? That's when they think. So how should younger people approach estate planning? People who are at least in that age where they're like, oh, death is like later. It's not anytime now, maybe 50 years from now, 40 years from now, or more.
Well, I agree with you because when I do workshops, I think people are hesitant to discuss it or come to the workshops because they feel that as soon as they come to the workshop, like they're going to die the next day. And it's like you missed the whole, like, again, that's a myth, right? And a mindset. We're not planning. And so when people do ask that question, like, at what point should I, start planning? It's for someone later. And I was like, okay, here we go with this later. It's a myth. Let's go. And I always turn back to COVID. Right?
Mm, mm,
Don't know. COVID did not target the older people only. It targeted everyone and had no
mm,
age group that it targeted. So when I tell that, look at that. Like, no, it came out of nowhere and people did not have things in place, right? Get something at least in place, right?
mm,
You can
mm,
always change it when major events happen in your life. It's not set in stone. You can change it. As soon as you reach the age of majority, have something in place. It's not again, people open savings accounts, right? People start other things at an early age. There's estate planning is no different. Start thinking about it, right?
mm,
Because again, we never know, right, what's going to happen. We don't know the time that God is going to call us home. We
mm.
just never, no one saw COVID, right? I
Yeah.
mean, now after COVID, people were trying to execute things from pretty much from a hospital bed. Like, no, like, because we didn't have it in place.
Yeah.
And so from a Christian perspective, again, it's just understanding what it is and like really debunk all these various myths that we have, like
Mm,
from I don't need it, or, I don't want to talk about death culturally because I'm going to live forever. I'm going to live until this particular age. But again, and that's also, it can really, if we really think about it, to be very selfish because I have not planned. So my failure to plan is going to most likely negatively affect my loved ones.
mhm,
Right
mhm,
now, because I didn't plan, now they have to spend all this, astronomical money on top of grieving my loss.
mm,
Now they have to have added more stuff onto them because I didn't think about them on this side of eternity
mhm,
or on this side of being in my right mind. I did not think. So now they're going to have to go to court. They're going to have to fight. Now the state has the control to say who gets what. When
mm,
I could have easily said, this is what I want in place. Listen, even if it was basic stuff, it doesn't matter. I thought of my family enough or my loved ones to say, listen, I don't want you to bewildered or to just go through X, Y, and Z when I could have just laid it out, a simple map, right? And I could have worked with an attorney to help me and assist me with that. So all you have to do is just the basic stuff is just either submit a document or, just basic as opposed to going through different hurdles that you should not have gone through.
yeah. So in your experience, has culture or race, when I say race, I'm thinking about different ethnicities, affect how one thinks about estate planning? If so, how do you approach that?
So for me, because I realized that just because of the culture and the race, right? I'm coming from an urban community. I come from a very strong Caribbean community where that's not discussed, right?
Right.
People, you don't have that conversation. But again, when people pass away, now they're looking for someone to handle, right? Doc or I would like to say cleanup because
Yeah.
that loved one did not put things in place. So now we have to go to court and now we have to petition the court to, appoint someone to
Mm.
be, the administrator over an estate. And so when you keep seeing this happening, like, wait a minute, how come? Let's have this conversation. We spoke about the mindset before. How do I change a cultural or racial mindset? I am but one person, right? And there's very
Mhm.
few of us. But my going back to the hand of God and being strategic, because I would have never thought that I would be in this on this platform or in this position, right? So it's like the hand of God. Like, I need for you to strategically, whether I'm going to various churches where I speak to individuals, it's like one person at a time or one church at a time. I would reach out to pastors. As mentioned, that I went to seminary, so I have I have colleagues who are pastors, senior
Mhm.
pastors, and so I'm like, well, may I have an opportunity to come to your church,
Sure.
to kind of share this? People have invited me to their church. They realize the importance of it, or I'll have my own workshops, to do it as well. Again, it's one individual or one community, one family at a time, to get the word out. And that's been for me on how to really kind of counter the culture of not having or not being aware of it.
Mhm. And I agree. I think even in this conversation, I've been convicted that, I need to get over this fear or whatever it is, cultural or whatever it is, because you're right. It's in the end, you are creating more trouble. It's not good stewardship or it's not good shepherdness for your own family if you leave them behind to fight. And if those things are not the problem, then you are putting a person who may not be a Christian in charge of everything to tell what it is, how you're gonna, or whoever the admin person will come. I don't know, but the point you're making is good point, and I think that's a really good way to approach a church and believers, and try to help them to see that. And I appreciate your and if you think about when you say hand of God is also involved in our death too. Nobody can give you an extra hour or a minute or a moment of life, and nobody can take that away either. So it's in God's control. And being a person of faith, a person who knows the Lord and serves the Lord, is a opportunity to share Christ too. Because in my personal experience, I think funerals or those people who are in that state where they are going to see the Lord soon, those are the moments when you people are most and their families are also very vulnerable, and that's the time to bring the gospel to their lives. But what it will look like when way early, when you are young enough, your brain thinks properly, you're coherent in your speech, and you are talking about those things, which is a reminder of death, even if it's 50 years from now, 40 years from now, 20 years, whatever that number is. But that does bring that vulnerability that creates the space to speak Christ, to bring hope of Christ, and just like, hey, there is eternity waiting for you, talking about that afterlife and all those things. So I see that as a part of ministry as well. So, what are the financial barriers to estate planning, if any?
There are, financial barriers. I think that's another issue as well, because it can be costly.
Mhm.
However, there was a season like back generations or decades ago where if someone wanted something so badly,
Mhm.
they would put it on layaway, right? Because they wanted that item so badly. And we cannot shortchange planning for the future and our family. So I have to think of it, if I'm willing to put something on layaway for something that has, by the time I buy it, as soon as you purchase it, it has like the value is like gone significantly by the time you actually get it. No different than when I'm planning for my estate, which is going to have really even greater value because I'm establishing a legacy. right? And so it may be costly, but I need to, if I have to make a payment plan, like my firm has a payment plan, I need to do that because in the long run, I'm establishing a game plan for my legacy. One thing when I tell people when I do workshops and that question comes up, was too pricey? And I was like, okay, well, you have something like a power of attorney that may cost let's say $250. If I don't have that in place and I become incapacitated, now my loved one have to petition the court and for guardianship over my person and property. And that guardianship starts at $2,500. Starts at.
Yeah.
So we're talking about something that I could have, while I had the capacity of $250. Now someone and now because I have no capacity, my bank account is frozen. So where's my loved one, if you're talking about the urban community, is going to get $2,500? Where are they going to get? You see what I'm saying? So again, I didn't plan correctly. I didn't think that far ahead.
Right.
And what I'm finding also is that a lot of people are coming to me and they're saying, my loved one has dementia, or they have the beginning stages of dementia.
Right.
When you have dementia or that you're at the beginning, you can't sign anything legal.
Right.
You cannot. It's different than a will. In New York State, I could just have that one lucid moment at the time of signing a will and be, have lack of memory before and lack of memory after. But once during that time of signing a will, if I have that lucid moment, the will is valid. It is not so for a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy, which requires a high standard of capacity. So that's another reason why I tell people why you still have the mindset. Get it signed, get it executed. Because again, when you get to that place of, oh, my loved one has has dementia, or my loved one has Alzheimer's, we can't execute a power of attorney at that time.
Right.
Legally, it will be fraud, right? So again, at least execute those two documents, the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy, just suggestions, right? But again, that's inexpensive. And then your family can pool together. Right? If it's $250, again, $250, it pales really in comparison to starting at 25. And I said starting, it can go higher than 2,500.
Right.
So I think it's better for us. And if you want to do the will, a payment plan, costly, but in the end, it's going to cost my loved ones more than if we, on this side of eternity, if I spend some money, if I put a payment plan, right? I can't think of clothing and putting a layaway plan to have greater value and greater significance than my health and my assets and my loved ones in the end.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I hope the listeners are paying attention to these details, and I'm praying that God is working in their hearts as this resource becomes available to them. How have you seen, I know that in the beginning of this interview, we talked about that too, but how have you seen God's hand in your work?
I'm just, again, going back to just being blown away by God from the beginning, because it was never my idea. I would never, because again, I mentioned earlier, it was never spoke about in my home. So, and it's not commonplace. It's not a cultural or racial norm. And for God to say, well, I'm going to use the least likely, right? Because it's never something that, it was never in your trajectory, never what you thought. But because I know where I am taking you. And how I'm going to use you and how I'm going to allow you to get saved, be built up in me, have a real strong relationship with me, have a foundation so that I can use you in the marketplace and use you in this area where my people, right, the urban people have no understanding about it. So you're going to be the voice for the voiceless, right? You're going to speak for them. You're going to speak to them and make them aware of planning, right? So that where no one else really came to talk to them about that, this is how I'm going to use you. And so I see it when clients come in, they're shocked. They're like, you're a what? You're a reverend? Like they're blown, like they're like, okay, Well, you're a reverend and you're an attorney. Okay, so right, so it's mind blowing. So some people, even my unbelieving clients, they still blown away by it. And so God has a great sense of humor, right? I need for you to. This is the door that I'm going to open on the platform, right? From secular and sacred. So I see God's hand because it's not just, as you mentioned, it's not mutually exclusive. It is all ministry for me, right? I'm a minister in the marketplace, if that makes sense.
That makes
So I
sense.
still have an opportunity to share. If God opens a door, there's some people who may be nominal in their faith, and there may be some people who are strong in their faith. I had opportunities to share with people, share the gospel. I've had opportunities, as I mentioned, I'm over, or I've, God has opened a door for me to have a prayer ministry. And so there have been times where we've prayed about a certain situation, and then it's like they leave there like, wow, okay, like, and it was all God. It had nothing to do with me. I just happened to be the vessel that God used in that moment. So whether it's estate planning or I also do real estate, God has opened the door, right, for people to see God, see the hand of God in me, whether we pray or not, or there's a trust value, or they see the integrity. All of that is really God. That has nothing to do with me at all. I know apart from God that they would never see like the good part, the good, anything good, right? So just God allowing that door for me to be a vessel of honor, his honor in the marketplace. I see the hand of God straight throughout. Again, I've had opportunities. God has shown himself in platforms that were secular, right? Platforms that were sacred, right? And it's all, again, for his glory. I stand before you and people like, you have they was like, you have this, you have that. Yeah, but I'm still, it's for God's glory. It has nothing to do with me. I'm trying to, again, get the word out, being on this platform, getting the word out, because again, as you mentioned, God is concerned about our states. He's concerned about everything that from beginning to end. He's the Alpha and the Omega, not just for the major, but for the minor things in our lives, for all aspects of our lives, right? He's concerned, right, about that. And he's concerned even what the legacy that we're leaving our loved ones, right? Leaving besides, oh, you have your mother's eyes or your father's nose, right? Right. Even like, what does that say about me and the gospel, right? Am I passing? What am I being a steward? Am I being a steward of what God gave me for my treasures, my talents, my resources? What am I seeing post, right? When I'm no longer on this side of eternity that I planned.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's a legacy that God honors. Right. And so again, marketplace, being the marketplace vessel for the Lord. So that's how I see God's handiwork in all of this.
Yeah. So what are the steps if someone wants to organize their end of life documents? Where should someone begin?
Sure. So I definitely reach out to an estate planning attorney, get a free consultation, or if they know of a workshop that's nearby, or, if they see something, I would go. And again, we're talking about getting information and getting knowledge. The more information that I have, I can make an informed decision, right? I can reach to someone that I guess I can trust, that can kind of, again, debunk those myths that I have, almost help me to change my mindset. Even say maybe a quick prayer, Lord, change my mindset, right? A quick prayer, right? You don't have to be deep in it. Just change my mindset, Lord. And again, go to an estate planning attorney and allow them to walk you through what the next steps are for you. So for what may work for person A may not necessarily work for person B. And so they can kind of walk you through that.
And if a pastor or a congregation wants to assist or encourage its members to get estate planning, where should they start?
They can also go to a estate planning attorney. I mean, I'm one, right? They can reach out to me, or anyone's like, I would like to. It's like, listen, I've heard, I was on, but listen to this broadcast, and I understand, the importance of having estate planning in place. But, my members would like to, obtain more information. Would you mind coming to my church and doing a workshop for us, right? And so, I mean, like I said, I have one scheduled. You can. I mean, I'm happy to do it for you. Obviously, I'm here, I'm passionate, but you can, I'm not the only estate planning attorney that's out there, but, you can reach out and ask someone, I guess a trust and estates attorney, if they're willing to come to your church and host one for you, or come, and do a workshop for you.
That's great. Thank you, Reverend Natisha. Anything else you would like to add to this conversation?
I think we've covered everything. I hope that based on this dialogue that we have, that people see that there's a couple of things, right? One, that this conversation is not one that this broadcast normally has. And
Right.
so we want to say, God, what are you saying?
Mhm.
God, you're clearly speaking, because I mean, you could have done it at any other time, but now you've chosen today, right? On this President's Day, this holiday, to have this conversation. Why? What are you trying to tell me, Lord? What do I need to do? So it's like we have to hear what God is saying. Maybe I need to get my affairs in order. And so God help me to change my mindset, right, about that, because God, I want to be a steward of the resources that you have given to me and trusted to my care. I want to make plans for, my loved ones. I want to make plans for, my assets. I want to make plans for myself in case I become incapacitated. I want to be a steward. So Lord, however that is, I hear you. Maybe as you mentioned that you got convicted, maybe I pray that people would hear the voice of God in this broadcast, like what God wants us to do, how to be better stewards moving forward in this life that we have been entrusted with.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show again. That was Reverend Natisha talking about the importance of estate planning. And thank you to all our listeners. We truly could not do this without you. If you learned something, have a topic suggestion, or would like to leave us feedback, drop us a note at oururbanvoices.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tune in 2 weeks for more honest discussions from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry.